Welcome to the Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. 3 martinis coming up.
3 good martinis to start off the week. We've had 3 good martinis before. I don't know if we've ever had them on a Monday. It's possible that we have, but man, it's rare, and we'll take them any chance we can get. And Jim, I would say these are 3 legitimate good martinis. It's not just like, the people who are doing horrible things.
If you squint, you turn it, you hold it the light this way, there's a glimpse of something slightly better than. No, these are 3 bits of good news.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the most breaking news, and that is from the U.S. Supreme Court. As we had suspected, and I'm sure Hugh Hewitt is doing a victory dance since he specifically predicted the margin here, the U.S. Supreme Court, ahead of Super Tuesday, which is tomorrow, ruling 9-0 that Donald Trump cannot be removed from Colorado's primary ballot. It's most likely that this will also apply to Maine and Illinois and any other state that wants to try and remove Trump based on the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which said that people involved with insurrections could not be candidates for office. Again, that decision 9-0 on a narrower 5-4 decision. The majority, and the ones that you would expect, Roberts, Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh, wrote that states may not remove any federal officer from the ballot, especially the president, without Congress first passing legislation. In terms of the 4 dissents, you had the 3 liberals, and then Amy Coney Barrett with a separate opinion saying that shouldn't have been the issue in this particular decision. So shouldn't necessarily agree on the merits with the liberal 3. So, Jim, there had been a lot of criticism of, if the court doesn't agree with Colorado, the legitimacy of the court is at stake here. The legitimacy of the court is not at stake here. This is a pretty cut and dried decision based on the fact that Donald Trump has not been charged with anything even remotely close to what's been outlined in the 14th Amendment. So what's your takeaway here?
Well, I mean, there is some bad news for the Supreme Court this morning. Yes, they issued their decision, but it has been overruled by Keith Olbermann. If you look in the Constitution, admittedly, at the time, a really great Sports Center anchor overrules a 9-0 decision, it is null and void. And it really, Keith not holding back any, quote, "The Supreme Court has betrayed democracy. Its members, including Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor, have proved themselves inept at reading comprehension." He's saying that the 3 minority women on the Supreme Court can't read. Direct all criticism. "And collectively, the court has shown itself to be corrupt and illegitimate. It must be dissolved." So first of all, this struck me, I don't want to say a no-brainer, but it was a real shock when the Colorado Supreme Court decision came down. I wrote both at NR and at a Washington Post column. I don't see how you could just say, well, Trump's committed an insurrection, therefore he can't be on the ballot without a trial, without a criminal conviction of it. And he hadn't even been indicted in it. And as you may have probably noticed, there's not a shortage of indictments of the former president right now. There's 91 of them, right? So I don't think Jack Smith forgot. I don't think Jack Smith was like, I'm just too busy, I can't file that one. He didn't file it because he probably either didn't believe the crime had been committed or didn't believe he would be able to get and sustain a conviction on that. My argument was that the Colorado Supreme Court couldn't just declare that Trump had done this and had sufficient justification to keep him off the ballot. And if they didn't have the authority to do that, there's no way that Maine's Secretary of the State could just unilaterally say, yep, looks like an insurrection to me, you're off the ballot. I got so many. Jim, you don't know. People wrote columns telling me how much I didn't understand the law. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm a complete layman point of view on this. But I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Jim, you don't know any. 9-0. Eat it, people. I don't usually want to get that way, but there were people who were just so confident. And at there were liberal, progressive law professors who were like, this is not terribly strong ground. The Supreme Court is not going to believe that the executive branch or the judicial branch can just unilaterally rewrite the criteria for this part, that only Congress has that kind of authority. Lo and behold, it's what they did. Even my former colleague, a guy I still like a great deal, David French, argued that there was sufficient legal justification for this. 9-0. You want to go after all the law professors, all the talking heads on MSNBC? Sorry, folks. This is about as solid a smackdown as you're going to get. And so, unless you want to believe that Kagan and Jackson and Sotomayor are now part of the vast right-wing conspiracy, and you want to join Keith Olbermann in the Central Park yelling at the pigeons and screaming at everybody that they've all been replaced with pod people or something like that. You got to admit, this was always a unlikely scenario, and that if you're going to take Donald Trump off the ballot because he's committed insurrection, you got to prove it in a court of law. That doesn't strike me as an unreasonable request. We don't, innocent until proven guilty, even for presidents you don't like, even for the idea that, because I heard people say, "Oh, Jim, we all saw it on our television." Okay, if it's that self-evident, go convict them. And nobody did that. And I think the court made the right decision here. And I think a whole bunch of people let their partisan hungers overcome their good judgment. And now they have a lot of crow to eat. Whether or not they'll actually eat it is another story. Jim,
you're not only entitled to spike the football, you can do a Billy White Shoes Johnson end zone dance or Chad Ochocinco, whoever your preference is.
I would cite a Jet, but the Jets don't score touchdowns, so I don't have any touchdown dances to point to.
Exactly. The other person I know who was making this push for a delegitimized Supreme Court, if in fact the decision came out this way, was Rob Reiner, who is always telling us that, Joe Biden's the greatest president of our lifetimes and things like this, which...
If you vote for anybody except Biden, you're destroying democracy.
Yes.
So your freedom to vote depends on having one choice. That's how we preserve democracy, is by taking away your options.
Exactly. I mean, watching him all these years, he's obviously been a lefty. I always thought he was basically playing himself on All in the Family. Now I realize he was actually making himself more moderate as a character on All in the Family, given what we're seeing from him as of late.
Social media rewards the most incendiary take you can get. So maybe Rob Reiner has normal days and just nobody pays attention to him on those days, at least on social media. So it's a shame. Princess Bride, so many good things he's done over the years.
Yeah, anyway, good director. Yeah, Few Good Men, Stand By Me, lots of good stuff. All right, let's talk about 4 Patriots, though, and go to 4patriots.com/martini. Free solar panel with the purchase of the Patriot Power Generator 2000X and free shipping on orders over $97 when you buy so many different products that they have available at that site. But the thing that I always take away from 4 Patriots is that you want to be prepared, especially in case your power goes out. There's not a lot you can do in that situation. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X is worth its weight in gold because it has double the capacity and is expandable, so you can run the big appliances like your fridge, freezer, medical devices even longer. 12 outlets, including 4 AC, plus 2 USB-C outlets to charge your phone lightning quick. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to get your Patriot Power Generator 2000X with the free solar panel included. Never needs gas. Plus, get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our second good martini now. Again, all 3 martinis are good today. Let's go down to the Sunshine State of Florida. This news broke, I believe, on Saturday, as the University of Florida has decided to detonate its DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion programs. Here's what it sounded like on WHAS TV.
This morning, the fallout after the University of Florida eliminated all diversity, equity, and inclusion positions, getting rid of more than a dozen full-time jobs, including the campus's chief diversity officer, ending 15 administrative roles, and canceling all DEI-focused contracts with vendors. The university, now led by former Republican Senator Ben Sasse, saying it's complying with new Florida education restrictions after the state legislature passed a law last year banning public funding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis celebrating UF's move, posting, "DEI is toxic and has no place in our public universities."
Jim, we've certainly talked about DEI in the past, whether it comes across as critical race theory or other programs designed to reward based on things other than merit and denoting people as either oppressors or the oppressed based simply on their physical characteristics and so forth. And so big win, first of all, for DeSantis, who signed this into law, the Florida legislature that got it done, and for Ben Sasse for not putting up a fight. He's gonna be the one that gets the immediate blowback here. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of it, but good for him. And I think the University of Florida is going to be much better for it in the long run.
Yeah. First of all, when this came out, it was not hard to find certain people, including Florida Senator Rick Scott, saying what a great job Ben Sasse did on this, which is fine. But you notice somebody who wasn't giving credit to, who just happened to have recently run for president, unsuccessfully dropping out after Iowa. But look, wherever you are in the spectrum, I think you should be giving credit to Ron DeSantis. That without him getting the ball rolling, I'm not sure this happens. This at least doesn't shake out this way. And for Ben Sasse, liked him when he was in the Senate, had the chance to interview him a couple of times. Sasse departed the Senate, and I think a lot of folks were like, there was a very short term in there, and he would not have. He was on the cover of NR. There was a perception he was going to be the next great conservative Republican senator. After I believe just one term, is like, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm going to be president of the University of Florida. And they're like, okay. Well, there's an argument to be made that he is. I like this comparison made by my colleague Jeff Blahar, who wrote a really good corner post about this. That he may be the next Mitch Daniels. And for those with long memories, after being a governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels went to be the head of Purdue University. And he did a lot of amazing things while there, but the single most amazing thing was like 7, 8, nearly a decade, there were like no tuition hikes. Which, if you know anything about any university or college, is just mind-boggling an accomplishment, and really made Purdue not just a widely respected school, but I think most people would argue a really fantastic value for what you're paying and going there. So I'm just going to turn it over to Jeff with his observation of this, and he says, look, academic reputations typically turn around with all the speed and agility of an early 20th century Russian battleship, but the signs are good so far. He pointed out that Sasse was very, response to the Hamas attack in Israel offered exactly the kind of comments you'd want to see. None of this equivocation or moral blindness you saw at other schools. And he points out that now the school's entire DEI staff is gone and they closed the office permanently. Jeff writes, I suppose it's bad taste to celebrate all of these people losing their jobs, but what you must understand is that all of these people needed to lose their jobs. We're talking about the purest deadweight in the entire university administrative complex here, a component without which most schools would run more, not less efficiently. So with the sharp stroke of Ben Sasse's pen, the entire festering sore is gone now, neatly and painlessly excised. Well, I don't know if it'd be neatly and I suspect there's going to be some blowback on this, but a demonstration that can be done. You really need probably very, very atypical leadership at that school and probably the backing of a governor, but it demonstrates that it can be done, and it demonstrates universities do not necessarily need these things, that they generally create more problems than they solve. They generally stir up, we see this class is protected and this class not as protected, and sorry, Jews, you're not in that category. There's just too many examples at too many schools of DEI being almost a leftist agitator within the administration, creating more problems for everyone else instead of solving them. So if it generated a genuinely more harmonious and happier and more productive and better campus, people wouldn't be so opposed to it. But the record is clear. And so good for you, Ben Sasse, and good for you, Ron DeSantis.
Exactly. Will be interesting to see now if Gainesville becomes the place where conservative-leaning people in Florida send their kids, and other schools that may resist this.
Look out, Hillsdale.
Well, Hillsdale needs some place to send other kids because they're bursting at the seams there. But it's been said by a former president who's likely to be his party's nominee again this year. Are you tired of winning yet? For those who loved Ron DeSantis, if you live in Florida, there's a lot of winning going on, and I imagine they're not tired of it yet, and they still got quite a few years to go. All right, Jim. Big policy win in a red state. Big policy win in a blue state. But the good news comes after a really bad martini a few years ago. Back in 2020, the voters in Oregon passed Ballot Measure 110. Ballot Measure 110 decriminalized personal use amounts of even hard drugs like meth and heroin. The idea was to move hundreds of millions of dollars also of marijuana tax revenues into drug treatment and harm reduction programs. Didn't quite work out that way. Instead, the state is ranked 50th for access and treatment. And of course, they have a massive overdose problem. Enter the legislators now in Oregon, and both the House and the Senate has overwhelmingly rolled back much of ballot initiative 110. Lopsided margins, 21-8 in the Senate, 51-7 in the House. That was on Thursday. Now goes to the desk of Governor Tina Kotek. And so, Jim, it's tragic that this was ever even part of the law, thanks to the referendum in the first place. But from what people have well documented in Portland and in other places in Oregon, this clearly wasn't working. The approach to take the more laissez-faire approach to hard drugs has had a tragic effect, and it's good to see that the legislature is recognizing that and rolling it back.
Yeah, if you want greater detail on this, my colleague Ryan Mills has been out there in Portland and talked to a lot of people who are otherwise down-the-line progressives, people who work in treatment centers, people who are small businessmen, people who want to help the homeless in places like Portland, and they all uniformly say this has been a disaster. And they don't say, in some cases, they were supporters of this change. but they've seen the results concrete right there in front of their, on the streets of their own cities and their own communities, and they can't defend it. And they're like, this did not generate the greater access to rehabilitation and drug treatment that we expected it to. It made the problem much, much worse. A lot of discussion on drugs kind of, you'll often hear prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s and 30s as some sort of example of this. And I think there's a lot of differences between hard drugs and alcohol. I have yet to see any church service that involves meth, Greg. But, there's probably some church out there that does it, But the point being that if I think all, left, right, or center, wherever you are in America, we probably all know someone who's dealt with addiction. We all seen someone who's had their life either ruined or cut short because of hard drugs, meth, etc. And they, if legalizing it made the situation better, I'd be open to the argument. If people were not, if it really was a circumstance in which decriminalization did not lead to greater levels of addiction and greater people losing their lives because of it, I'd be open to that argument. Unfortunately, the evidence is otherwise, and sometimes things don't work out the way you expect them to. There are a lot of people who believe that over in Europe, that once they legalized prostitution, it was going to end sex trafficking. Unfortunately, when you legalize sex work, you tend to increase demand, and all kinds of criminal elements step in to meet that supply, leading to even higher rates of sex trafficking than there were before. Sometimes people don't react to the changes in the law and the incentives the way they expect. I don't doubt that a whole bunch of people who passed this law genuinely believed it was going to improve the addiction crisis in the state of Oregon. Did not work that way. And it's really just kind of refreshing to see a whole bunch of Democrats in there who probably voted for this law or supported this law in the past saying, all right, we can see the results. This did not work. It's time to move in the other direction. Hopefully this will see some progress. It's very hard to believe that that decriminalization wouldn't increase usage. It wouldn't make people say, okay, if I get caught with, meth in my pocket in the streets, I'm not going to have any, problems with the cops. When you increase the consequences, you probably increase the deterrent effect, and hopefully we get to, climb back out of the hole that we're seeing out there in Oregon.
Yeah, the rest of this New York Post story also says the legislation, assuming the governor signs it, and even if she doesn't, I think they've got veto-proof majorities here, it enables police to confiscate the drugs and crack down on their use on sidewalks and in parks. Imagine trying to take your kid to a park with all that going on in large numbers. Drug treatment is to be offered as an alternative to criminal penalties. However, they could face up to 6 months in prison for using. The bill also aims to make it easier to prosecute people who sell drugs. Jim, the idea that it was difficult to crack down on drug dealers is just
I was going to say, how'd you like to be a cop? How'd you like to be a cop in Portland? You bust a guy, you got a crack pipe in your pocket and dime bags and here's some... Well, I guess under the law, you have to let you keep that. Never mind the arrest or prosecution. I can't even take it from you. Really? That's one of those cases where you're like, which side are you on, Oregon state government? So once again, good for them for reversing this and moving the ball in the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's the people that correct the actions of the legislature. This time the legislature had to correct the actions of the people. And I have a feeling over time we're going to find some similarly deleterious long-term and short-term effects of this rampant marijuana legalization, probably not as immediately as we see from the hard stuff in Oregon, but I feel like the evidence will pile up over time. So,
Greg, don't you love every downtown of every major city smelling like a burning tire fire? It's great. It's a huge upgrade. White guys with dreadlocks saying, hey man, you got any change? Yeah, no thank you.
Well, it's less of a concern than carjacking in D.C., but it's still not fun to be down there with that.
The only upside is that we've got really relaxed carjackers now. They're much more laid back. Like, give me the car and your Doritos because I'm really got the munchies.
Why don't you get the bigger bag? Why don't you get the bigger bag? Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America.
Why didn't they get the bigger bag? Bidenflation. That's why, Greg. There's fewer chips in the bag. This is going to be like 40 minutes of the State of the Union later this week.
Jim Garrity, National Review.
We will end this podcast.
You already know who he is. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Subscribe. Thanks for reviews and your kind comments and all that good stuff. Get us on your home devices. Find us on Twitter. You probably already know how to do that. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline _DC. Have a great Monday. See you on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.